The Big Orange Splotch. Mr. Plumbeam lived on a street where all the houses were the same. He liked it that way. So did everyone else on Mr. Plumbeam's street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbeam's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. Nobody knows why. He dropped the can, nobody knows why, right over Mr. Plumbeam's house. It made a big orange splotch on Mr. Plumbeam's house. "Oh, that is too bad," everyone said. "Mr. Plumbeam will have to paint his house again." "I suppose I will," said Mr. Plumbeam, but he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splotch for a long time, and then he went on about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing the big orange splotch. Somebody said, "Mr. Plumbeam, we wish you would get around to painting your house." "Okay," said Mr. Plumbeam. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. Then when the paint was gone, the roof was blue, and the walls were white, and the big orange splotch was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same. But Mr. Plumbeam's was like a rainbow. It was a jungle. It was an explosion. There was a big orange splotch, and there were little orange spots. There were stripes, and there were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, "Mr. Plumbeam has popped his cork, he's flipped his wig, he's blown his stack, and he's dropped his stopper." They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbeam got some carpenter's tool. That night, he built a tower on the top of his roof and painted a clock on the tower. The next day, people said, "Mr. Plumbeam has lost his marbles and he's slipped his hawser." They decided they would pretend not to notice. That very night, Mr. Plumbeam got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees and baboas and thorn bushes and onions and a franapan. And in the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbeam swinging in his hammock between two palm trees, and they saw the alligator laying in the grass. Mr. Plumbeam was drinking lemonade. "Mr. Plumbeam has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Mr. Plumbeam, what have you done to your house?" the people shouted. "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams," Mr. Plumbeam said. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbeam to go and have a talk with him. Tell him that we all liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him his house has to be the same as ours so we can have a neat street. The man went to see Mr. Plumbeam in the evening. They sat under a palm tree drinking lemonade, and they talked all night long. Early the next morning, a man went out to get some lumber, rope, nails, and paint. And when people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to Mr. Plumbeam's house. "What have you done to your house?" they shouted at the man. "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be. "It looks like my dreams," said the man. "I've always loved ships." "He's just like Plumbeam," the people said. "He's got bees in his bonnets and bats in his belfry and knots in his noodle." Then one by one they went to see Mr. Plumbeam late at night. They would sit together under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbeam's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing his house to fit their dreams. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbeam and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be. And it looks like all of our dreams." If you were to draw your own house, what would you put on the outside? I hope everyone is safe and having a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.